This is my audience. My dad is here. Everybody else that I know is out of town. So this is all I can muster up. Let's begin. Everyone loves a happy ending. The couple in the Hallmark getting married, the bad guy getting the justice he deserves at the end of the movie, and the protagonist at the end of the movie finding out what he's supposed to do with his life and doing a whole 180. Currently, there's a bad guy on the loose. Well, actually, a lot of bad guys. And we need your help to solve this. According to NBC News, a new study by Truecaller found that in 2016, roughly 22.1 million people lost a total of $9.5 billion to robocalls, far more than in 2015, with an average loss or that a person lost being $430, end quote. Now, of course, this is a lot of money, and I'll go over that in the rest of the speech, yet we hold the responsibility to protect ourselves, but also, more importantly, our elderly peers and our family members. The robocall scam can be prevented, and the only obstacle in the way is ourselves. We can prevent them by realizing the scope and impact of the issue and taking action. Here's a roadmap of my speech. I have 3 main points, a couple side points, and a conclusion. My first main point is the actual cost of these robocalls to scammers. The second is a roadmap of how these robocalls can be affected. And the third being how much of an increase of robocalls there are currently. These robocalls aren't affecting these robocalls affected 22.1 million in 2016. But how much do they actually produce? Like, they may be expensive and they aren't sufficient for these scammers, right? This leads me to my first point. My first point, you can tag as, robocalls are expensive and create a profitable success rate. Subpoint A. According to Sigma Voice, quote, they are one of the simplest to understand. You can simply pay each phone dial. The dial's phone number can be an attempt to connect. Typically, pay per dial price is as low as 5 cents. 5 cents, end quote. Basically what this is talking about is how 5 cents per dial, that's barely any, and per victim, you're getting 430. If I was a scammer, that might be the first thing I'd look at as robocalls, considering they're automatic and you don't actually have to do it yourself. You just set up a bot and they do it for you, and you rack in a bunch of money by barely calling any, and barely having any cost to it. Subpoint B, the first impact is clear. The scammers have no incentive to stop, considering that the cost is a nickel, just a singular nickel. And to convince them to hand over this valuable item and money would be crazy. The scammer would just keep it, obviously. This transition, we have talked about how much an average of $430 and how cheap it is to manufacture these falsified robocalls. Let's take a look at my second point. Robocalls affect the trust of many, which harms small business. Subpoint A, according to Pegasus Communication Solutions, quote, robocalls are everyday annoyances in the majority of Americans. In June, more than 4.3 billion robocalls were placed. A high volume of these robocalls were affecting trust in voice calling, damaging the unwanted call. The category is including fraudulent scams calls as well as inappropriate sales calls, i.e. scams. According to most scammy calls are used by robo-dialing and robocalling technology, end quote. Basically what this is talking about is how 4.3 billion robocalls are being placed. They don't have to do anything. In a real world scenario, me and you, we get about 4 or 5 robocalls a day, maybe 10 at the highest. Yet some real small business that's trying to branch out by doing telecommunications, they try and call you. You don't actually know the number, and it says a scam risk because you don't know the number. They're more hesitant to pick up if they just received 5 robocalls that were all scams. They might be hesitant to pick up the 6th or the 7th or the 8th. Therefore, they can't actually branch out, and so it actually affects their trust in these small markets. The second impact is it's a double-sided sword. Not only is the annoyance on you and everyone else, but it has a large impact on the economy. Because every $430 is taken from me and you, that affects how much we can actually spend at the supermarket because we're taking it out of our budget by getting scammed. And so our purchasing power is going down, meaning we have to rely on small or worse items, meaning we can't actually have flexibility in the market, meaning our confidence in the market is tanking, as we can see. There's a great question here. If robocalls have such a big impact on the economy and small business, then how many robocalls are there exactly? This leads me to my third and final main point. There's 2,269 robocalls a second in October. That is, if we're talking about a scope, that saying it's a large scope in and of itself is the understatement of the century. To say according to Robokiller.com, there are 2,269 robocalls every second. 163,143 robocalls every minute, and over 1.3 billion in the span of a week. This is in current status quo in 2022. The other evidence that I said earlier was talking about 2016. They said 1.3 billion a month. We're down to 1.3 billion a week. That is a lot. That is a lot of robocalls, meaning the numbers could be higher in the current status quo than they are right now. My second subpoint, this can only really increase. According to Fox Business, quote, robocallers are on an all-time high following the brief turndown of the COVID-19 pandemic, according to the organizations tracking them. We need to stop this now before it can be unstoppable, end quote. Subpoint C, you can tag as, there's a solution. According to Robokillers.com, quote, robokillers are still the #1 complaint to the Federal Trade Commission, FTC. Thankfully, there's a solution to fight this. According to Robokiller.com, the best solution is a blocking app because it prevents robocalls from reaching you in the first place. It's that simple, end quote. The transition here, let's summarize these main points real quick and give you how you can play the biggest role in this plan being passed. In conclusion, we talked about how easy and cheap robocalls are, how it affects the economy and small business trust, how many robocalls there actually are in late 2022 alone, i.e. 1.3 billion a week, which is still a lot. Yet, let me make one more appeal to you. See, I was talking about happy endings at the beginning, and it seems fitting that I end with a happy ending as well. I watched the movie Top Gun Maverick in the summer, right? I would say it's a 10 out of 10 movie, one of the greatest of all time that I've personally watched. Yet, what makes the movie so great is how it's not one actor in this that makes the whole movie. It's not just Tom Hanks. There's a whole cast behind it. There's a director, there's other scenery, there's actual technology like these planes that they use, and the actual voice behind it in terms of like their intentions of making the movie was to actually support the viewer. And so here's the role that you can play in this. See, each great story has a climax or a build up to a climax where the main character and antagonist, they build up to the climax, and there's a fall, right? And there's a fall, and then they meet the happy ending, right? So let's just say you're the director in this case. I've given you the climax, I've given you the plot itself, I've given you the main character, I've given you the bad guy. Now it's your turn to cast this movie and to see how this story or how this happy ending actually follows out. Thank you.